Good morning. This is a meeting of the Baltimore City Council Health, Environment, and Technology Committee, and it's now called to order. I am Danielle McCrae, representing the 2nd District and Chair of the committee. Today in attendance, we have from the Mayor's Office, Sophia Gebrenwatt, and from the Council President's staff, we have Preston Lewis. To get started, globally, we are becoming increasingly aware of the accelerated impacts of climate change. Baltimore City has become more and more vulnerable to these effects, and our residents have faced extreme heat and increased flooding events in the last couple of weeks, especially. And we know that if we do not take progressive and targeted action, the impacts will continue to get worse. Our neighborhoods that consist of mostly Black residents continue to face the greatest levels of environmental injustice, and waste diversion is critical to our city's focus on decreasing greenhouse gas emissions, taking on more sustainable practices, reaching zero waste goals, and shielding all from the harsh impacts of climate change. This conversation has never been more important, and it is a job of this council, our city agencies, and the greater community to collaborate in this effort to expand current systems, build out new ones, educate one another, and curate innovative solutions. DPW has laid out its waste diversion plans within its Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan. City agencies like the Office of Sustainability and local organizations have also published strategies to ensure we are comprehensively rethinking the future of waste management and holding each other accountable. And I firmly believe there is no better time than the present to have this conversation. Today, we're going to be hearing on Legislative Oversight 220019, which is a quarterly legislative oversight hearing of the Department of Public Works for the purpose of calling for quarterly oversight hearings for the Department of Public Works regarding agency operations, staffing, safety of fleet, facilities, and equipment, and other responsibilities to improve transparency and accountability in serving the residents of Baltimore City and others. We're going to start with a presentation from the Department of Public Works, and we're going to periodically pause if necessary to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman McCrae, members of the council and council staff. My name is Richard Lunam, the new Deputy Director for the Department of Public Works. I joined the department last month and will be representing Director Mitchell, who is out of the office this week. Shortly, I'll turn it over to Yvonne Moore-Jackson. She's our acting chief on the Bureau for Solid Waste. We also have staff here as well, administrative staff, should there be any questions. We have about a 30-minute presentation for you. We're available to answer any questions that you may have, and we look forward to this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvonne Moore-Jackson. I'm the acting Bureau Head for Solid Waste, and I'm going to do a presentation to do an overview of what we are doing for waste diversion. This is the overall leadership team. Some of them I have here with me for administration: Toya Sykes-Coates, Jerome Ragsdale for routine services, Yolanda Kaysen, street sweeping and roll-off, and Michael Lucas for marine operations. We currently have 4 vacant division chief positions that are currently posted, and we're recruiting. We have the first set of interviews August 30th. There are 9 offices and facilities throughout the city. The bureau is broken down into divisions. We have the administrative bureau, the Administrative Division, Special Services, Marine Operations, Street Sweeping and Roll-Offs, Property Management, Routine Services, and Disposal Services, and our new division, Waste Diversion. The Office of Waste Diversion was created in January to focus on developing and implementing waste diversion initiatives, activities, and programs. It consists of 3 analysts, 1 liaison officer, a recycling associate, all who will report into the zero waste manager. The office oversees and develops all waste diversion activities, including our food scrap drop-off centers, preparing reports for the Maryland Recycling Act, providing input on legislative and pertinent solid waste recycling and other topics as needed, applies for grants and funding for solid waste diversion programs, and also schedules and attends community events that promote waste diversion. One of the things that we are working on is the feasibility study for our closed landfills. It's in progress. We're in the first phase of it. We're hoping to use some of these sites for waste diversion facilities and activities. We have applied for several grants and awards to help with funding these waste diversion activities. In summer of 2021, we submitted some ARPA proposals, and we're still waiting for final determination on those. We were awarded $7 million from the state for a Northeast transfer station, $4 million for this fiscal year and $3 million for next year. We've also partnered with the Office of Sustainability on a $15,000 award from the U.S. Conference of Mayors for food rescue workshops, composting, and funding for school programs. The EPA was given $350 million over 5 years to support 2 grant programs. DPW recently replied to these solicitations, and we want to make sure that we apply for these grants in the fall. In partnership with the Office of Sustainability, we also will be applying for the USDA Composting and Food Waste Reduction Grant that supports new food scrap drop-off centers and local food recovery organizations. DPW has collaborated with many city agencies, communities, and private partners and other interested parties to complete waste diversion activities. We participate in the Waste Working Group monthly meeting. We also participated in the Food Matters program, and we attend regularly community meetings and meetings with advocates to move Baltimore closer to the zero waste goals. Some of the legislative updates include the HB 264 Organics Waste Diversion Law. We sent in comments for that, and we also responded to requests for information for the 2 grants that I spoke about previously. We are in the process of updating the 10-year solid waste management plan that's due in next year. So we're working on a timeline to make sure that we have community engagement and make sure we meet the deadline. Some of our community engagement includes our Trash Talk Tuesday on once a month on Tuesday on Facebook Live. We also have growth pop-up centers, the shredding events. We distribute a newsletter, and we also attend different community events throughout the city.
Bureau Head, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you speak a little bit closer to the mic, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is this better?
It is.
Okay. All right, moving on to our recycling efforts. I'm happy to report that we will begin school recycling this year, the first week of September. Schools are currently registering to participate, but they can register throughout the year to be added to the route in the next 2 weeks. And although crews pick up unlimited cycling at curbside, we still have our 8 community recycling drop-off centers throughout the city. We received a $250 grant from the Recycling Partnership for an anti-contamination campaign. The purpose of the campaign was to educate the public about recycling practices and about reducing contamination in the recycling stream. Outreach included postcards, we had television ads, we passed out flyers, we had billboards, and we used social media to get the word out about the anti-contamination. We also are trying to increase our recycling opportunities by working to have multifamily dwellings to recycle. They are required to recycle if they have more than 10 units in their office building. So we want to make sure that we get all that recycling so we can meet our recycling goals. DPW has started a pilot program at all of our drop-off centers. People can bring in food scraps to all of the 5 drop-off centers. And so far to date, we have collected more than 60,000 pounds of food scraps that have been diverted from the landfill. DPW has also fulfilled the Less Waste Better Baltimore recommendation to distribute recycling carts to each of the residents. And there are efforts along the way to make sure that we improve our recycling collections. And although we provide unlimited curbside recycling collection in January 2022, we modified recycling services to begin bi-weekly bi-weekly collections in order to stabilize operations and to provide consistency. Many challenges, as laid out in the letter that Director Mitchell sent on July 20th, have prevented us from collecting weekly. We are taking steps to move closer to resuming weekly recycling, and we are recruiting for CDL drivers, conducting route optimizations, and ordering new vehicles, also engaging with private contractors to make sure that we can sustain while we are working through the progress. This slide here, I just want to show before we distribute the carts and after this particular route, 42001 in Southeast Baltimore. Before, this route took 10 hours, and after, this route has been taking 15 hours to complete. Residents were, residents were using the yellow bin that you see here. It was easier for our crews to see what was in it. If it was trash or recycling, they could toss it into the truck and move on to the next one. Now with the larger cans, it's a heavier recycling. They have to use the arm lifts to make sure that they're emptying the full can, and it's just taking the routes longer. So I just wanted to just give a short snapshot of why we were in that situation to move to bi-weekly recycling. So modifying the recycling schedule to bi-weekly, as you can see here, week A and week B provided some relief to our employees who were working 16 hours a day for 7 days a week trying to keep up with the recycling services. This stabilized most of the routes and provided consistent service to the residents. We are making continuous progress to get back, and we want to do that. We are conducting a compensation study to increase the salary of the drivers, and we also have an internal CDL program for employees who want to be promoted to drivers. We are conducting route optimization to make sure the routes are efficient and balance the workloads to keep the routes within the employee's schedule. We've also ordered new load packers, and again, we're actively working with private contractors to help us make it through. On this final slide, this is another snapshot of the recycling tonnage from June of 2019 before we distributed the recycling carts, and then again now of June 2022. And you can see that we're collecting close to 14 tons now. Previously, we were collecting about 5 tons, so that the loads are heavier. And we just want to make sure that our employees are able to complete the routes on time and get this recycling off the street. So all of the solid waste services have been restored except for this weekly recycling, which we are trying very hard to get back on track. So I just wanted to say that, our employees are working very hard. We are proud of the things that they're doing, and we will get back to weekly recycling once the actions have been taken. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, and looks like we made it through the presentation in less than 30 minutes. We are going to move to questions from the committee. At this time, I'm going to start, and just so you guys are aware, obviously we will start with just a few questions about recycling. So the first one you did briefly go over. You did state, well, DPW stated, the director stated at the last hearing, and also within the memo, that you guys were working with DGS to return 29 load packers to service, just recognizing the present supply chain issues and economic disturbances that we were facing. Are all of the load packers returned to service, or how many have been returned to service, and what is the timeline for the remainder?
No, all of them have not returned to service. We have 34 that are still in the shop waiting for repairs. But we have ordered new load packers, and we're anticipating them to be the first 10. They told us could be here sometime in late January. So we're looking forward to that.
So back at the last memo, it was 29. You said that are we up to 34, or was that just an error in that messaging?
No, we're up to 34. So every day, there's a possibility that a truck will go into the shop for some reason or another. So that 29 that was in the letter was a snapshot in time for that day. Okay. You guys answered one of the questions that I had, which I appreciate, which was about tonnage. I do want to discuss what recycling at our residential drop-off centers. We know that our residents have increasingly utilized the residential drop-off centers for recycling since recycling collection services have been modified. Do you all have tracking data, infrastructure to just assess resident utilization of the recycling drop-off locations between 2020 and 2022? Are you referring to the neighborhood drop-off centers?
Yes.
We started those in January of this year, so we do have the information for how many residents are using those drop-off centers.
Are you able to break down that data at this time for each drop-off location?
Oh, to right now? No, I don't have it with me right now.
Did you have that information, sir?
No, we do have that data. It's in total, it's 547.
And I apologize. Do you mind going to one of the mics and just introducing yourself? Thank you, sir. Sorry, I saw you nodding in the background.
Yes, John Land, solid waste analyst in the Bureau of Solid Waste. We track it. It's reported into a clean stat report, and we can get you the individual tonnage for the locations, but in total, since January to August 13th, it's 547 tons.
Okay. We're going to make a committee request for that information for each drop-off location. Thank you. We're going to move to Councilman Schleifer for questions at this time.
Thank you.
And actually, I apologize. I didn't even get you guys in. So we were joined by Councilman James Torrance. We were joined by Councilman Schleifer and also Councilman Mark Conway. And Councilman Schleifer, you have the floor at this time.
Thank you. This isn't one of my questions, but I guess we'll just start with this. How come Director Mitchell's not here?
Hi, Richard Luna, Deputy Director for Department of Public Works. The director is out this week, so I'm acting on his behalf.
And Councilman Schleifer, the director, did inform me about 3 weeks to a month ago that he would not be able to make it. So I just want to make sure that that's on the record.
Okay, thank you for that. Director Mitchell was warned in advance about the different challenges that would be facing when rolling out these blue recycling carts, and so now that we're seeing this information that you're providing about the additional challenges created by these carts, do you believe it was a mistake to roll them out when we did?
Richard Luna again, Deputy Director. I don't have that assessment for you.
Ms. Jackson?
I can't say that there was a mistake. I mean, I wouldn't say there was a mistake to roll the cans out. The decision to roll the cans out was before me, so I'm not sure. You know, I can't tell you why they were rolled out.
Okay, so the cans, I know there was obviously talk about it prior to the director coming in. Others, this came through a grant, and so this has been a long-standing conversation. But the director was here when the cans started rolling out, and he was warned that it was a bad idea to roll out the cans when he was doing them, and that there was already challenges, and doing that would further exacerbate that. And so, you know, I'm a little confused when we're blaming like these cans. It's going where you say how the routes, like this route went from 10 hours to then 15 hours, but then also on the recycling collection page, you say how these routes are taking 3 to 6 hours longer to complete than before the recycling cart distribution. I don't think that's a fair assessment, considering the fact that you guys are ignoring the main factor why these routes are taking longer, which is that you're picking up every other week instead of weekly. And so what the employees on the ground, the people who are essentially breaking their backs every week to try to make these collections and collecting double the amount of stuff every other week, which I've already expressed countless occasions that it's unfair to require an employees who are the laborers who are working on the back of the trucks to be collecting 2 weeks worth at every collection. That's why it's taking longer, not necessarily because of these recycling carts. And I'm just curious why the fact that every other week collection, why that factor is being neglected from the assessment of why routes are taking longer. Do you believe that the fact that it's every other week is leading to longer collection routes and making these employees work these extended long hours?
No, I don't believe that. The reason that It's taking longer is because we have to stop at each property for the recycling carts. The bi-weekly, we moved to bi-weekly to make sure we had enough resources to cover all the routes. We have 80 routes. We need 80 drivers, 80 crews. We have 63 drivers on the books and 47 available. So we just didn't have enough resources to continue with the weekly recycling. This is why the routes were too long.
So just to clarify, I mean, you just said this on the record, that you do not believe the routes are taking longer because the workers are now picking up 2 weeks worth of recycling instead of 1 week.
No.
Okay, so that's physically impossible. When I put out my recycling at my house, and I put out double the amount of stuff because it's covering 2 weeks, it takes the employees a longer period of time to pick up double the amount of stuff at each property than it does previously. In fact, it's actually even more challenging. I'd say it takes them even more than double the amount of time to pick up double, simply because if I was able to fit everything into my cans, right, and they bring the cans over to the truck and they dump the cans into the truck, that's a quicker process. Now, all the stuff does not physically fit in that can, and so therefore, there's stacks of recycling basically lined up, and you're welcome to come to my district any Friday, or I'll drive you around. My district's a high recycling district, and you'll find that the curbs are entirely filled with recycling. That means these employees have to go and bend over and pick up double the amount of stuff. And in addition to that, when it rains, which somehow, it ends up raining or it's windy every recycling day, and so the stuff's extra heavy because it's not in cans, so it's all getting wet. So I'm just telling you, I would respectfully disagree with your assessment and say that it is absolutely contributing to the fact that these routes are taking a lot longer, and I would say it's actually the single biggest contribution to the fact that these routes are taking longer. And frankly, I don't understand how you guys are not, compensating these employees appropriately for that work they're doing. They're being asked to do double the amount of work, and I haven't heard any plan from you guys about how you're giving them
Councilman Schleifer, we truly appreciate your comments. Did you have a question at this time?
Well, I mean, they answered the question. I guess I would refer it over to the Deputy Director. Do you believe that the fact that they're picking up double the amount of recycling is taking more time on these routes?
If you go back to the presentation on slide 22, so if we look at a snapshot of what recycling was like back in June of 2019 compared to a snapshot of what it currently is in June of 2022, you'll see that the total that was collected throughout the city is actually increased substantially. So with the rollout of the blue carts, there is obviously more people participating in the program. There's more tonnage out there that needs to be collected, and so that does add to the fact that these routes are taking longer, just so simply there's an increase of usage of participants throughout the city.
Sure. So I guess I will make a request and then pass it off to one of my colleagues for their questions. But I have previously requested the data for the collections over the past few years. I've received that data. The data I've received has actually indicated that recycling numbers have been down over the past year as opposed to previous years. And so this is the first time I'm seeing an increase. So what I would like, again, an updated one, and so I can compare it to the previous information I've been provided, is a month-by-month count of recycling tonnage collected, going back for 2019, 2020, 2021, and then this part of 2022. Just a month-by-month. I know you guys have it readily available, so if you can provide that to the committee.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
We're going to move to, and thank you, Councilman Schleifer. We're going to go ahead and move to Councilman James Torrance for his questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a question more so for the Deputy Director, not Ms. Jackson. My question is, can you provide more details regarding the Cleaner, Greener, Beautiful Baltimore initiative? Can you provide more details regarding the Cleaner, Greener, Beautiful Baltimore initiative? Explicitly the application process, the applicant requirements, the target assistance to community organizations?
I'm not sure about that program.
Hi, Councilman Marsha Collins, DPW. Are you referring to the mayor's announcements of the Clean Core?
Yes.
Okay. I can talk to that briefly. This is a program that actually is very similar to the work that's been done under the Be More Beautiful program. It's almost like an extension of what they do, where they're actually going to work with communities to help them develop interest in and get residents involved in cleaning of their areas, and they will have various incentives through that program. And this is to, the intent, as I see it, is to reinvigorate the support of people to take pride in their neighborhoods and to work in collaboration with us. We all have responsibilities for our own properties and to make sure our communities are clean and safe. So he's looking at this as an opportunity to extend out into the community level, the street level, to get people activated and excited about getting areas cleaned. And so they have various incentives as part of that program. I haven't seen an entire breakdown of it, but what we can do is provide the committee with how that, more detail on how that's going to work. So I don't know if that helps or it helps answer your question, but okay.
So not really, because I believe that it was an article in YPR that announced a Cleaner, Greener, Beautiful Baltimore initiative, and I know that the council did not get any notification about it. So I just wanted to know what is this initiative, because I believe that it was an investment of, I believe, $13 million that was supposed to go out, or somewhere around that amount that was supposed to be given to the agency. I just want to know more details about it.
And Councilman, staff can pull that information together, and we can send that briefing over to you.
That would be great. Extensively in a briefing memo for the entire committee and the council. One, again, the application process, the applicant requirements, targeted assistance to community organizations, because if there is significant funding coming out the door, as with any organizations I've dealt with in my communities, there is a desperate need for technical assistance, as well as contract monitoring as well. With that, I yield back to the chair.
Councilman Conway, did you have any questions?
I do, yes. Hello, how's it going, guys? I want to follow up on the line of questioning from my colleague, specifically around the length of time for the routes. I was curious if we have any analysis that looks at the difference in time between recycling routes and our trash routes. Are our recycling routes taking longer than our trash routes? And I think that might help us understand if having overflow from the bins is slowing down people at each house. So if we could have that comparison, or if you have any insight on that, that'd be helpful.
We have data on the route and the times at the route. Okay. All right. We have data to let us know when the route times have ended. The recycling routes are larger than the trash routes. So the trash routes, we have 45 of those trash routes. And then on the recycling, we have about 20 per day. So it's almost double. The recycling routes are almost double the trash routes. So they were always, that's the last routing optimization that we have was based on the participation in the recycling. And that's why we have to do an updated to make sure that the routes the route times are efficient and making sure that the workload is evenly distributed for the employees. So the trash routes, again, we have more of those than the recycling routes.
Got it. How many recycling routes again?
We 20 per day. We have 80 recycling routes per week. We have a total of 80, so it's about 20 per day.
And going back, and I was kind of looking through, and I'm not sure if I missed this because I was a few minutes late to the hearing. Do we have a plan for restoring recycling? Do we have a timeline? Do we have cost assessments? Do we know how many new employees we need and additional trucks if necessary?
Yes.
Can we provide that to the committee?
Yes.
I'll yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Conway. So this hearing, just so everyone is clear, who's at home or who's going to be watching this later, is specifically regarding waste diversion. So I'm going to get into just a few other sides of it. And my first question on this side is going to be, you briefly spoke about it, Acting Bureau Head Warren Jackson, about HB 264. What I want to know is, what is the status of the city's plans and preparations for the new state law requiring organic waste diversion that is set to go in effect on January 1st of 2023?
So we do have our composting, our food composting sites, 5 at the 5 drop-off centers where people can bring their food composting, their food scraps for composting. So we have that, and I don't know if Marsha, you want to say
Having problems with my mask, excuse me. Again, Marsha Collins, representing Department of Public Works. So that very legislation, for those who may not be familiar, is that in FY23, any entity that is generating 2,000 tons or more of food waste a week must look at a hierarchy of diversion to keep that out of the waste stream. It starts with, what is donatable food for people who are food insecure, what can be repurposed. Animal feed is certainly one. And you go down the list, and composting is the opportunity to turn this waste that can't be donated or repurposed into a usable soil amendment. So the challenge is for these entities to have a place in which to get the composting done. And as our zero waste advocates like to point out, we don't have one here in Baltimore City. They would really like to see one. And we've been working with them on that. And one of the issues that was expressed earlier in Yvonne's presentation was the assessment of our closed landfills. We have 4 that we're looking at currently. We've started to get preliminary results about what may or may not be useful land there. And in talking to compost advocates and to people who actually perform composting, land is the critical issue to be able to get something established. So we see that effort to assess these 4 closed landfills as a real opportunity perhaps to find a location. And we are also looking at other opportunities, including some of the infrastructure opportunities to see if we can't seek out assistance in funding for that, because you can start small but expand, but you need the money. So that's kind of where we are right now. I'm not sure if we have a sense yet, Yvonne, of when we might see the final results of those assessments of the closed landfills.
We are in the first phase of it. We have a meeting next week. They're going to let us know how many acres are useful on those 4 sites. So I believe the meeting is on the 23rd, so we'll know preliminary, how much of the space is usable.
Thank you. I think that actually spoke well of some of the preparations that you guys are preparing, and that was the question. My next question is, how much residential food waste has DPW collected for composting through the food waste drop-off pilot program?
To date, we've collected approximately 60,000 pounds of food waste.
And the next question before I do go back to my colleagues is, what is the current status of the composting pilot program, and is DPW exploring opportunities to continue to expand that program? I feel like Marcia briefly touched on that, but if you can add more
Yes.
context to it.
Yes, we're going to continue to accept those the food scraps at the drop-off center. So initially we had a grant for that, for the pilot, but we do have funding to continue to accept those materials.
And if I might just add, again, Marcia Collins, we are currently working to expand those opportunities, and we're going to reapply to the NRDC in collaboration with sustainability, so we can expand those locations so that more people have the opportunity to conveniently participate. And we have been in discussions with the institutions, higher education institutions, who are doing this work on their campuses and who are very interested in working with us and being part of the application for grant funding to provide the neighboring communities to come in and bring their food waste there. So that may be a more convenient location for them. And so we're looking to try and find through those higher education, and also encouraging a couple that want to start food scrap recovery. This would give them an opportunity to participate, and we could help with some of the funding, and we could also provide a benefit to local communities.
Thank you, Marcia. We're going to go back to Councilman Schleifer for additional questions.
Yes, thank you. Just to clarify some of the dialogue with Councilman Conway, you said there's 45 trash routes and 80 recycling routes a week. Is that correct?
It's 45 trash routes per day.
Per day, okay.
Per day, not per
And
week. I'm saying we have
5 days a week, or?
4 days a week.
Okay, so that means, so you have 180 trash routes a week. Is that correct?
So we have 45 per day, yes.
So you have 180 trash routes per week, and that is, and then how many recycling routes? You said you had 20 per day, 4 days a week. That's 80, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So is it accurate to say you have 260 routes in mixed refuse between trash and recycling?
Yes.
Okay. So in the letter the director sent us the other week, it says you have 179 routes for mixed refuse and recycling collections. Who's right, you or the director?
If it's in the letter, I'm guessing we gave them that number. So I may be rounding up or something. So I
rounding
don't
up,
have it
okay,
in front of me, but I can, maybe I'll just, give me 1 second. So each day we have 67 routes that we have to complete. That's between recycling and also trash. So on some days it goes up 1 route, so it's not exactly 20 each day. It may be 18, 20, so I can get you that number.
So, I mean,
But we're not trying to I'm not trying to give you false information. We have 80 recycling routes, 178 trash routes. That's what we have. So I could be rounding up when I'm saying, 20 a day, but this is what we have. I have it on my sheet.
Okay. So, and I know you're not trying to.
I don't know. I'm not in the daily, I'm not working in routine services daily, so I don't know the numbers of every day. I'm telling you that we have 80 recycling routes, 178. Whatever math, I'm not adding it up in my head correctly, but that is the number. Whatever's in the letter, that's the number.
Okay, so look, I know you're not intentionally giving us bad information. First of all, I just want to say I appreciate your responsiveness. You have been responsive in responding when I've sent you emails and asked questions. The department overall has not been so responsive, and I think it's kind of clear why in general. And I'm not putting this all on you. I'm just saying on a high level, which is why it's always helpful to have the director present, because it's very difficult to try to get to the bottom of this issue without having accurate numbers and knowing what the actual challenge is. And I'm sure the 5 people who are watching on Charm TV are probably scratching their heads saying, well, in previous hearings, we were told there was 22 recycling routes and 70 trash routes, and then in a different hearing, we were given different numbers. And so the numbers have changed up a lot. And so the issue that I have today is that we have a major discrepancy between what the director sent in the letter of 179 routes between trash and recycling and this 260 number, or if it's 268 because it's 67 times 4, whatever it is, it's somewhere between the original number of 92 that we were told in the past versus 268. And so I guess my question for you is, how many physical people are we short today, both drivers and laborers, in order to get recycling back to weekly? What is that number?
In order to get recycling started today, we have to have the route optimization. So we won't be able to do that. We won't be able to start the recycling until we get the route optimization, make the routes efficient, make the workload balanced. The workload has to be balanced so that we can make sure employees are working within their allotted time. So I can't tell you how many routes we will have after the route optimization. I can tell you what we have right now. We have 80. We need 67 drivers every day to get on the street for trash and recycling. So we need those 67 drivers, 134 laborers. If we have that, we could complete the routes that we have now.
Okay, so that's a good start. So how many drivers right now do you have?
Right now, we have 66
66
allotted.
or 63?
We have 66. I'm telling you what we have. We have 66 allotted for that service. Today, we have, out of that 66, 63 are filled and 47 are available.
Okay, and how many laborers? You said you need 134. How many do you have today?
Yeah, so laborers, we have 181 that are on the books. We have 160 that are filled and 115 that are available.
Okay, can you just elaborate on that? You said you have 150 on the books. That means there's 150 laborers being paid today?
No, 181 positions.
Oh, positions, okay. And 160 of those
160 people actually are filled.
are being paid right now in those positions. They show up to work, the 160?
That's how many that are filled,
Okay.
right?
And the 115?
115 are available today.
Okay. So based on what you're telling us today, is that, well, first, I mean, there's 2 questions I have on that, but where are these additional people that are on the books that are not available? I assume they're out sick or is it sick, vacation time, or any of these extended leave?
So the one out of the 167, and this is for the laborers, 7 are on A time, 14 are on light duty, 9 are on scheduled leave, 2 are out sick, 1 is on permission leave. We have 2 that are out for some EAP issues. We have 3 that are on X leave, meaning they didn't call, they didn't show. And we have 7 that called out, and that leaves us with the 115.
Okay, and out of the 160 laborers, how many of them are on A leave?
I just said this is that.
Oh, that was the driver. That was in
That was
total.
the laborers.
That was total, the laborers. Okay, so then on the drivers, of these 15 drivers, 16 drivers, how many of them? What's the breakdown of those?
So we have 63 drivers that are assigned. That means they work. The position is filled. 0, no one is on A time, 1 on restricted duty, 2 on scheduled leave, 3 have DOT issues. That means something is going on with their license right now, so they're out. 1 on X leave, they didn't call or show. 9 that actually called out, and we have 47 that are available.
Okay, so if you can provide that breakdown to the committee, but so I guess where we are right now, based on these numbers, the constant you're saying of 67 drivers per day, 134 laborers per day. Right now, you have on the books 63. You need an additional 4, and you need all of these employees to show up. And then when it comes to the laborers, you have 160 on the books, and you only need 134. So you have enough of those employees. You just need them to be showing up. So
Yes, that's correct.
from what I'm just hearing from an operational standpoint, what appears to me is that this isn't exactly this monumental lift that the council has been led to believe. It's really more of just knowing where the employees are and knowing if they're showing up and if they're not showing up, or if they're no call, no show, like that gentleman who you said. I mean, you don't show up and you don't call, you get fired. Basically, it just seems like this is really not such a heavy lift when it comes to employees, but more you're also saying the route optimization. Where my concern is like this: recycling has been picked up weekly for a long time. Prior to the director being here, recycling was picked up every single week. And so this route optimization is not what's holding back. Certainly it will help us become more efficient, but that can't be the issue. And so what I don't want to see happen is that the route optimization comes into play, and then all of a sudden we're saying, well, we're still short these employees. And we're not actually short these employees, because there's other employees that can be moved from other services to this. Other services were prioritized over these services. And so that gets into my next question, that if you had...
Councilman Schleifer, we're going to hold on that question right now. What I do want to see was, because you guys did let us know that you're going to be also sharing monthly written reports with the City Council starting September the 1st. I want to make sure that the committee request that Councilman Schleifer did put through is provided to him. But what I also want to see on these reports is for you guys to include the number of service employees each month who are on A time and also on light duty. Councilman Conway, we'll come back to you, Councilman Schleifer. Councilman Conway, do you have questions?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. My other question, if you guys could provide a little detail. I know the director, myself, you, Ms. Moore, we've been meeting regularly with groups in order to think about some of this waste diversion piece. Can you talk a little bit about that work and how that's going? I think it'd be helpful for the committee to know that work is happening.
I'm going to ask Kara to come up to talk a little bit about it.
Good morning. My name is Kara Murray. I'm administrative analyst in solid waste. And just to clarify your question, you're asking about the working groups?
Yes, the working group to explore options to meet the Less Waste Better Baltimore plan and conversations around composting and so on and so forth.
Sure. So one of the waste working groups, or I guess the waste working group that I am a part of, is a subset of the Sustainability Subcommittee. And so DPW leads the waste working group with participation from other agencies, including sustainability, DHCD, and we meet monthly. And some of our main goals, there's a working plan, and includes, we're trying to gear up towards developing green business guidelines for local businesses in Baltimore to kind of opt in and become more sustainable with their waste practices. Right now, we're trying to get a survey through BCD, so through their connections to local businesses, to gauge interest in what specifically they would like support with for green business guidelines. I'm gonna let you know. Okay. We've also, through that group, we've met with MDE, so we've made connections with the 2 regulators that have been hired, particularly to enforce HB 264. So they've been very responsive and have attended meetings to help give insight on how MDE would like to regulate that law. And so through that working group, we were able to have a discussion and provide feedback to MDE on their proposed regulations. So we have not received confirmation that they received that, but they're still in their 30-day period for public comment on that proposed regulation. And so we expect final regulations hopefully soon. We also, in that working group, hear presentations from, for example, a company called Reaply, who's interested in reducing or promoting diversion of office materials from landfills. So it's kind of tying into what I understand is going on within our Office of Procurement, just trying to get materials where they're needed rather than disposed. So those are kind of the highlights from the waste working group.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think it's important that we continue to talk about this bigger picture. I think, of course, recycling is a really, really important part of this picture. And I also think it's important to understand we are continuing to think forward about where the department will be in 5 or 10 years on these issues. I encourage you guys to begin thinking about what the budget may look like. I'm sure the budget process has already begun. But for some of the investments that the city will have to make in the next year and what those changes may look like, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that work. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Conway. I'm going to get to a few items within the Less Waste Better Baltimore plan. Within the plan stated in 2017, the diversion rate for residential waste was approximately 42%, and the commercial diversion rate was approximately 54%. Does DPW have more recent data? And if so, how does it compare?
I don't have the recent diversion rate, and I'm not sure if anyone from my team has it. Okay, if not, so I'll take that back as a note to get to you.
Okay.
The most recent diversion rate.
We'll have that as a...
Councilwoman, if I might add, Marcia
Sure.
Collins again, DPW. One of the struggles that we have in getting good data is that a lot of entities are not required to report their tonnage. and where their waste goes. So one of the things we've been doing at the state level is trying to encourage legislation. It didn't make it through this last session, but to have mandatory reporting so that we know what is and isn't happening. The residential field diversion is more narrow in its description at the state law level. It's very, what do you put in your can at the curb? And we know there's a lot more going on there as well. But I do know that this team has tried to get good understanding of what's happening out there, and it's just very difficult. If a business doesn't have to report or isn't required to report, we just don't get the data. Some of them cooperate, but most do not. They spend a lot of time reaching out and not getting any responses. So we're hoping that we can maybe get some mandatory reporting requirements at the state level that will help give us a better picture. But in the meantime, we're doing what we can to look at it. And I suspect any data we would get right at this point in time would be speculative and probably incomplete because we just can't get the kind of cooperation we need to really understand what's going on.
And I truly appreciate your comment and just explanation on the commercial side. If you guys can definitely give me the information that we have as an agency for the residential side,
Yes,
and the
ma'am.
most up-to-date data that we have on the commercial side. And I'm pretty sure that some of the folks on this council, including myself, would be talking to our state legislators about obviously enabling language for our local jurisdictions to make sure that we are able to properly, the commercial customers are able to just properly report those items that we need to move forward. Another solution a solution that was listed within the Less Waste, Better Baltimore plan is the construction of a series of decentralized mini MRFs around the city, which would give us more control over recycling and would lessen the travel to transport our recyclable materials to WMRA's MRF in Elkridge. It did state that the city could expect a full build-out of the mini MRF program with 16 facilities across the city. Is this something that DPW is currently working on, or what's the process on that, the progress on that?
We have requested funding for a MRF in the capital budget and also in one of our ARPA proposals. So we're still waiting to hear back on funding for that. But that is one of the things that we have requested.
Has the administration provided a timeline for a response on that ARPA proposal? Or has the ARPA office provided that information?
We don't have that timeline at this time.
Thank you both. I do have additional questions more so around composting. And give me just 1 second. So one thing that we know is that we already have community organizations and local urban farms, community gardens that have stood up community-scale compost processing sites. Advocates, subject matter experts have stated that keeping collections and processing local and on smaller scales can potentially limit negative environmental impacts like greenhouse gas emissions related to transporting the organic material. And small-scale operations can also raise awareness, increase demand, and build community trust and partnership. So my question, the first question is, how is DPW actively working with these cohorts in this greater initiative to make composting accessible to all neighborhoods regardless of zip code? And again, that was something that you briefly touched upon, but if you can expand on it.
All right, so the only service that we have for composting currently is the pilot at the 5 drop-off centers, and then also we're collecting at 2 of the farmers markets. We are looking at one of those closed landfill sites to hopefully we'll be able to build a compost facility so that we can talk about collecting organics from residents throughout the city. But right now, the only thing that we have available is at our drop-off centers.
Okay, is this I would say this, is there some type of work that's being done in collaboration with possibly the Office of Sustainability and just collaborating with these stakeholders, with these community stakeholders?
Yes. Hi. For the community composting
Can you give me your name again?
Sorry.
Just your agency's.
I'm gonna raise this up too. Kara Murray, Administrative Analyst, Office of Waste Diversion. The community composting organizations throughout Baltimore, we do partner with them to host backyard composting workshops frequently. They have a really great setup that allows us a good example to show people how, say, the 3-bin composting system works. It's a grant-funded program. We provide stipends to the host farmers and to the instructors. And we try to get those across the city in various locations to highlight different urban farms and agriculture. And so we have their wealth of information you can share with the workshop participants, and then we give backyard composting bins to participants for free as part of that program. Is that addressing?
I think you hit it on a few pieces. What I'll probably do is just clarify offline, get some more information offline. Composting organic matter enriches soil and plants. I think you might want to state it because you might can answer this question. And then I'm going to get to Councilman Schleifer. How does DPW engage with Recs and Parks or DOT to utilize composted materials for the purpose of beautifying and greening our communities? What does that collaboration look like between agencies?
So historically, I'm not sure. Started last October. Right now, we do know that Rec and Parks has 11 urban agriculture sites that have material that they'd like to be composting. So there's an opportunity there to connect with them and generate composted material. I don't know if any others have input on other ways that we use composted material if there's a requirement to use that there. That's not anything I have more information on.
Okay, just as a committee request, Sophia, if I can just get more information about just how our agencies are collaborating around this particular issue, and thank you. I'm going to get to move back to Councilman Schleifer for
I want to just follow up on your question.
Sure, Councilman
Madam
Conway,
Chair.
you have the floor.
One of the major opportunities with composting is, of course, the ability to sell that compost. Is that something we currently do?
We're not selling compost. We have a contractor that picks up the compost from the drop-off centers.
Some folks here may be familiar with the MDE program in partnership with Prince George's County, in which they have a massive composting site. They actually get compost from all over the state. Nonetheless, they take that compost and they sell it as a product that ends up in major department stores called Leaf Grow. Pretty high quality. I'm not sure what they make on that as a return, but certainly as a revenue source, I'm curious about what that may look like for us should we expand our composting program. Just a thought. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer?
Thank you. You guys were, in your presentation, it says you requested $61 million of ARPA dollars. From what we heard at the ARPA hearing last week, you guys were given $10 million. So what is that $10 million going towards?
I don't have that information with me right now, but I know our chief financial officer is here, so we can coordinate and get that information and come back to that question.
Can they come up and tell us?
Yes, I believe he was just in the other room on a phone call, but we're going to send somebody out to go get him.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'll go on to a couple other questions and I'll come back to that. So on the recycling opportunities, you talk about expanding recycling and multifamilies. Is that a short-term idea? Is that a long-term idea?
So in order to do that, we need an enforcement mechanism. Multifamily properties with 10 or more we'll have, starting, I believe in January, we'll have to recycle. And so we need to figure out how the city is going to enforce that.
Well, I don't think the city's actually not enforcing any recycling right now, recycling violations, due to the fact that recycling is not being picked up weekly. So there's actually a hold on all enforcement. And so I don't even think enforcement is really the conversation. But when this program does go forward, will the city be picking up the recycling from these small complexes, or are they going to be required to handle that privately?
I'll have to look into that, but I believe they're responsible, because right now we don't pick up commercial trash, so I'm assuming we probably will not pick up the recycling, but I'll double check what the law actually says.
I mean, I could be mistaken, but you guys don't pick up any trash from multifamily or condo complexes or any of that?
If I could just intervene just real quickly. Yeah, the state law that was passed both for larger complexes, 10 units or more, and they had another law for office buildings of certain sizes are required to recycle. What the challenge has been is we reached out when that first law about multi-units were going to be required. We pushed out to the laundry list of multiple family dwellings that we have in the city, sent information out, alerted them to what the responsibilities were. And to their credit, a number of them were doing it, but then we started getting emails and calls from residents of those buildings saying that they're not recycling anymore. And the key to all of that was when China went through their process of saying, I'm not taking any more of your trash and recyclables, the markets became difficult, and so a service that they were actually getting paid for to get collected for the value of the recyclables was now costing them money. And so what we have seen just anecdotally is that a lot of these places are just saying, well, I'm not going to pay for that.
No, I get that, but are you
So
guys?
that's why Yvonne was talking. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That's why she was talking about the need for enforcement.
Right. I mean, look, I think it's would be the most hypocritical thing if we sat here and started talking about recycling enforcement for the private sector, whether it be multifamily, commercial properties, et cetera, when DPW is in clear, blatant violation of the law, which requires that curbside collection be taking place every single week. That is not happening, and so therefore, I think if we want to start talking about violations, I think we then should move forward on my piece of legislation, which would put forth enforcement and violations of a fine of $1,000 for each offense to the DPW director for violating that law. So we can't have it both ways. You can't cite residents for violations, especially ones that are only occurring because DPW is in violation of other laws. And that's what I incurred in my district, which is why there has been a temporary hold on enforcement, because I had constituents who received violations for their recycling overflowing on their property, which was only overflowing because the recycling is not being picked up weekly. So I wouldn't necessarily go down that road, but I guess just to answer the question, do you guys pick up trash right now from any commercial properties, whether it be condos, apartments?
Yeah, we do collect from condos, yes.
Okay, so then I would assume then we're also picking up recycling from them as well?
Yes, we pick up trash and recycling from condos, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, and I see our finance team is here, so if I can go back to my initial question. You guys got approved for 10 of the $61 million from the ARPA. What is that $10 million going towards?
Good morning. Aaron Moore, CFO, DPW. So for the ARPA allocation, It's my understanding that DPW is being awarded funds via the planning department for the Clean Core program via solid waste. I'm not familiar with all the details of that proposal, but we are working on the details of that. In terms of a specific allocation to DPW as the agency, we have not been officially communicated with for any ARPA funds.
Are you referring to the program of the $14.7 million to clean up 15 neighborhoods?
I think solid waste would be more knowledgeable of the proposal, but I believe that we are being awarded funding to finance that program.
Okay, so ARPA, the ARPA office was here for their quarterly hearings last week, and they said that DPW was awarded $10 million. So if you want, I can connect you and the ARPA office in on an email so that everyone's on the same page that you guys have been awarded $10 million. So with assuming that that information is accurate and you're getting $10 million, what is the first $10 million going towards? Like, what's your top $10 million worth of priorities out of the $61 million you requested?
Sure. It's my understanding the last time we reviewed that information that we still needed an additional $6 million for solid waste facilities through the CIP. I think we were awarded 17.8 and needed 23.5 or something close to that amount. So I believe solid waste facilities to finish to round out the CIP allocation. And in addition to that, I believe we're looking for a new home for the Inner Harbor Division.
What's that?
The Inner Harbor Division of Solid Waste. I think they're looking for a new location. I think that was one of our requests as well. I think that's one of the top ones.
Inner Harbor Division. I'm not familiar with that. Can you share what? I mean, I know the Inner Harbor gets a lot of resources from the city. So what? Do they have their own division of?
So it's the Marine Operations Division that handles all of the cleaning of the harbor waters, also corner can collection, the Midtown trash and recycling collection, and collecting trash in the park. So it's one of our solid waste divisions that is housed on Eastbourne. So that facility is, we need to relocate to another facility. That's one of the facilities that we're leasing.
Okay, so my second question on the number, so that's 10 million, thank you for that. If you were given an additional $15 million, what would the next projects be?
Off the top of my head, that's a little bit difficult, but I think we do have some priorities. Most of them are, of course, on the solid waste side. That is where we need the most investment at this time. So, we could potentially round out some of our facilities. I think a couple of our locations need new homes as well, potentially. So although we do have the money in the CIP for our existing facilities, like Crescent, Rebirth, King Street and Rebirth, sorry, there are some other locations, like the marine operations that need new homes, permanent homes.
So you're saying basically that if I handed you a check for $15 million, you'd put it towards infrastructure and solid waste?
I would say that we would look at all aspects of solid waste, and we do have a list. I think we can provide you with our top priorities for that additional money. But off the top of my head, unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me at this time to tell you the exact list of priorities. But there are a lot of things that we need to do, and recruitment of CDL drivers, things like that, and solving some critical systemic challenges.
Sure. Well, I'm glad we found some common ground. I agree that we need some infrastructure money, and it should go in solid waste to build capacity. I see the Northwest Transfer Station every single day is backed up onto the train tracks, and that's obviously a problem. So would you say, I guess I'll pose this to Ms. Jackson, that do you agree, do you believe that this $15 million that's going towards cleaning up or cleanups in 15 neighborhoods would be better spent on expanding our capacity in solid waste and therefore preventing people from illegally dumping in the communities? Like, one of the communities that is listed as a potential community is one in my district, and certainly I would hope that, for throwing money, $1 million at a community, I'd obviously prefer go to my district, but the community has trash issues because the transfer station has capacity issues and people don't want to wait in a line for 2 hours to legally dump trash, so they go into neighboring neighborhoods and they drop the trash in certain spots. And so this $1 million, if that neighborhood gets awarded, would go towards cleaning that. So would you prefer to see that $15 million go to increasing the capacity so that we deal with the root cause of the issue instead of just throwing $1 million towards cleaning up the neighborhood, which will then get dumped on again and again and again?
I think to Chief Financial Officer Moore's point, the department has multiple priorities and requests that are going through that ARPA process. Is it worth discussing whatever the prioritization took place before this point, so how we develop those lists of priorities?
Yeah, I think we've also looked at opportunities for waste diversion in the CIP and the reconstruction or rehabilitation of our facilities. Some of them would have an expanded footprint to accept certain things for waste diversion, like mattresses and things like that, I believe. So that's in part of those plans for the rehabilitation for some of those facilities and expansion of the and rehabilitation of the convenience centers. So I think that's in that $23.5 million. In addition to, I think we wanted to run a larger campaign as well about changing the culture of waste, and other waste diversion and zero waste initiatives would be included in something like that.
Aaron, you got my full agreement on that stuff and increasing that capacity. Did DPW, was it DPW's idea to spend $15 million in cleanup money for 15 neighborhoods?
Those decisions were made prior to my arrival last month. I would defer to Chief Financial Officer.
I think that's a proposal from the planning department that we are being funded through.
So the planning department made the proposal. Did you guys tell them as the solid waste experts that, hey, we can better spend this $15 million if we increase capacity in these facilities so that we can accept more trash so that the trash doesn't end up in the neighborhood? Did anybody tell planning that, hey, maybe you should stick to what you do and we'll stick to what we do, and here's what we can do with $15 extra million? Did anybody do that?
Councilman Marsha Collins, DPW. I would just say that every agency was allowed to put forward ideas. Obviously, when you're trying to run an operation in solid waste that has been disinvested over many decades, that obviously we would love to get every bit of dollars that we could, but we also understand that what we're doing in the city to clean is part of a collaboration. And if I, as a resident, don't do my part, we are just going to constantly be running everyone ragged in solid waste, cleaning up after ourselves. And so there is certainly a value in what they're putting forward. Would we like another $15 million? Absolutely. But we understand there's competing ideas and competing requests. If it makes a difference in those neighborhoods and they become very involved and eyes and ears and vigilant, then that will help us ultimately. But yes, we'd love more money, but we understand we're all competing for those dollars. I appreciate your comments, though, sir.
Yeah, and Marsha, you're one of my favorite people in city government, and I don't like to disagree with you. But what I would say, just to add on to what you're saying, is before asking the citizens to do their part, we as the city have to do our part. So if we're asking people to recycle, we need to pick up the recycling. If we're asking people to take certain things to the transfer station, they need to be able to do so. And so I agree, and I'll go ahead.
Thank you. I respect those comments, and I understand we would love to be able to collect weekly. We're heading in that direction. I know it's not fast enough to make people feel good about it, but that's what we intend to do, and I understand exactly what you're saying.
And I have more
as
questions,
my
but I'll defer to
representative.
the chair if
I like where you're going. I just want to make sure everybody else gets some in first. Thank you, Councilman Schleifer. We're going to go to Councilman Torrance.
So I'm going to start off with, I have another request, which is a joint meeting with DPW and planning, because I mentioned this exact program, maybe an hour ago, and there was no answers for it. And I'm a little concerned, especially with the marketing around it, because I once was a staff person in Clean and Green of Baltimore that was housed in solid waste, that had the programming, that had the models to do this, that were successful, that still have the infrastructure to do this. So my question is, one part is having with these both agencies is like, have we looked at that model again, right? Because the staffing levels are the same as when we were at that time, right? And then the question is, the other piece, and this is a question I pose back to the administration again, why is solid waste still funded on general dollars? And when it comes to cuts in DPW, solid waste is that portion of the agency that's cut. And again, I want to make sure that that question is answered again. And again, and I posed this to you, Aaron, when you were in the budget office. We have a human capital issue, not a funding and service issue. And that was posed again by what my colleagues have discovered in terms of who's available, who's not available. And again, we got the same questions on the budget hearings that we're funding to the service level. That is, quite frankly, misinformation. And I'm being frank with you, Aaron. So I don't want your response now, but I want a meeting with both agencies to figure this out, because there's two parts. We need to address the human capital piece and the funding piece, and have an agreement on what that funding level looks like moving forward. Because at this point, I'm getting illegal dumping sites that are reoccurring again, despite the fact that we work with housing, we work with solid waste to get them cleaned up. So I just want to be frank and say that we need two things. One is understand what the program is. I want to reiterate that request, which is, what is the application process? What are the requirements for the applicants? Then the contract monitoring, especially since it's two agencies now. In addition to that, I want to know what investigation, what type of information that you used to come up with this programming from planning, but also looking at the model that we had in Clean and Green of Baltimore, which happened nearly, I say, 10 years ago. It took a 2-year program. We got it up and running. We had community gardens throughout the city of Baltimore. That led to the adopt-a-lot process. So we have the infrastructure and the actual processes in place that were created by this former program that was successful, but why are we not reusing that same infrastructure? And then again, the question is a commitment from the administration on the funding for solid waste, and commitments that no cuts will come to that portion of the agency, as it's come to not any other portions of the agency because of the current utility funds that we use for the rest of the agency. So I just want to make sure that's reiterated.
And Councilman, yes, we received your request now, so we'll coordinate our communications and strategic alliances staff for working, coordinating that work with planning. Staff just sent me that information over, so we'll get together and then we can set up that meeting and briefing.
I'm going to get into some other questions, but first a comment. Research has shown that nearly 80% of incinerators in the U.S. are located within marginalized, lower-income communities, majority Black communities. And Baltimore City is not immune to that statistic. This long-standing environmental injustice has led to long-term environmental and health impacts. When implementing waste diversion strategies, how does DPW plan to target communities that have been worst affected by decades of environmental injustice?
So I'm trying to understand your question. Are you asking how are we working in those communities where near the incinerator, or that have been affected by the incinerator?
That have been impacted by environmental injustices, especially within Baltimore, considering where that incinerator is. And keep in mind, I'm saying that because I don't have my Councilmember Stokes here, but he always talks about how equity is a buzzword. So how are we it's a buzzword right now. So how are we centering plans around these communities, how we implementing waste diversion strategies and centering these plans regarding communities that have historically been impacted by environmental injustices?
So the only thing I could say, we work in those communities every day on our solid waste activities. With waste diversion, some of the activities that we're working on, I mean, we have the growth centers, we have the composting workshops that work in those communities, but I'm not sure if I have a valid response for you on that right now.
Okay. Marsha, who's the equity officer for DPW? Are they here today?
Thank you. It is Marco Merrick, who heads up our Office of Equity and Environmental Justice. One of the things that we're doing is when we are meeting with some of the zero waste advocates who have a very strong interest in making sure we continue to progress with waste diversion and how that's going to look. We are working with them to formalize kind of a working document and a working relationship, because they're very interested in a lot of work and groundwork they've laid in South Baltimore, which is a community that has been breathing the incinerator for decades. We want to be able to look at where we can do some of these waste diversion activities and where those communities will welcome those activities. And what we want to do is reach out to those who obviously have had the brunt of those impacts that have not been good as we handle our waste. So I feel like our work with the zero waste advocates and their willingness to collaborate with us will help inform us even more than what we already have in our own information. And we have to look at that in all the programs. I mean, some communities may not welcome a compost facilities, others may, but we would like to see some of those communities that have, as you say, carried the burden, be the recipients of maybe some of the pluses of waste diversion, including, you know, local jobs. So that's been a conversation we've had with the zero waste advocates, and I think that's going to be a foundational part of that relationship we develop with them going forward with these programs.
Does DPW have a concrete running document or equity plan?
Yes, I believe we do. And in fact, we have an equity workshop next week. We've been meeting, I think, every other month about looking at our practices and our circumstances, both to develop the equity within the agency and to be cognizant of how communities need to look at equity. So yes, we are working on that, and we've had a lot of training sessions and a lot of gatherings, and next week's we have some committee report outs on those issues as well. And I know that Marco Merrick does sit in on our zero waste advocate meetings and has been advising us as we go forward.
So I have a committee request. If DPW could furnish the committee with their equity plan, specifically around communities within Baltimore City. What I would also like to see, if you guys have access to this data, is some type of map showing where you guys are engaged with waste diversion across the city. So say if you're having these growth centers or you're having other things, I want to see if it's within certain zip codes. So my next question is going to be, how much waste is the city currently sending to the Bresco Incinerator, and how does it compare to prior years?
I don't have that with me. I can get it to you.
Okay, so that would be another committee. Looks like we have a lot of committee requests for this one. The next one is that contract is going to end in 2031. We know that the infrastructure is aging and that there is a concern from community stakeholders, many advocates, that the system could fail prior to the end of the contract. Does DPW have an emergency plan if the infrastructure fails at the incinerator? And when I say that, I'm thinking about an incident that a similar failure that happened in Detroit. So are we prepared? Is that something that we're thinking about? Is there an emergency plan in place if that infrastructure fails?
Right now, anytime the incinerator goes down, we send our trucks to the landfill. So they are dumping at the landfill when those occasions happen.
I'm going to go back to Councilman Schleifer.
I think you skipped Conway. As much as I'd like to ask more questions,
You have the floor, Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the questions Madam Chair was asking. It was a lot of what I had on my mind. One, that emergency plan, really important. Two, knowing that we don't want to end up in a situation in 2031 where we have to find another way other than waste diversion to deal with our trash. It can get incredibly expensive. What are the options on the table right now, knowing that we are well on our way to get there, that being 2031? What are we thinking about to make sure that we are implementing the infrastructural pieces, the staffing pieces, and otherwise the education really that needs to happen for homeowners, for folks in Baltimore about waste diversion? Tell me about what we're doing there, please.
So our communications office is assisting us with getting the word out about our waste diversion activities. We had the anti-contamination campaign that was helping us educate the public on recycling, what goes in the recycling bin. And I'm trying to think. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I'd really like to hear, not so much a part, but do we have a plan for what life looks like after the incinerator? And how do we get there?
So that's something that we're working on. Again, we're ready to update our 10-year solid waste plan. We are in the initial phases of that, looking for a vendor to assist us with that. So that will be a part of the planning process.
And to that end, what are some of the immediate things that we are doing or should be doing to help further us along that process?
For the plan?
Within the next year, what are some of the things that are going to change within our waste collection, our education? I know we have drop-off centers, but we all know that the drop-off centers are for people who are already thinking about these issues, and frankly, out of the 600,000 people that live in our city, many are not thinking about this. What are we doing this year to prepare for the changes that we know will have to happen by 2031? Absolutely, and frankly, possibly sooner if we have a failure of these infrastructural options.
So we are applying for funding and grants for composting facilities. We're looking at those closed landfills for sites. We got the funding for the East Side Transfer Station. That's going to help with some of our small hauler program. We are trying to get funding for the composting facility and the mini MRF. So a lot of it is based on the funding that we can get. But we are planning to start this waste diversion. Well, we already started, but we will continue to work on it.
Do we know what that bottom line is for that funding? What do we need, and how is there a breakdown anywhere for us?
We do have the initial funding amount for the transfer station. We have I want to say we have not the word is escaping me, but we have an idea of what these facilities are going to cost, but we don't have the most accurate numbers. We just have an estimate of what they're going to cost. But until we have to get a contractor to come in, do design work, let us know how much it's going to cost, or how much it's going to really cost before we can begin.
Okay. One of the things that I think I've had trouble wrapping my head around for waste pickup is if we have 3 bins, a 3-bin system with composting, how we manage that with our trucks. Is that a third route, trash, composting, and recycling? Or I know other cities have trash trucks that have both recycling and composting, or recycling and trash on the same truck. We don't really have that as an option, given we use our alleys. I'm really curious how we're beginning to think about that. I know we do have, we're trying to find a vendor to help us think through a lot of these things, but given the timeline, we are a little bit under the gun, or I say a lot of bit under the gun. I am concerned about the pace with which we're moving forward here, and I continue to be a part of this process, and I've been kind of pushing along all the way. But I do think it's really, really, really important that we consider all the various pieces, because as you know very well, this is not simple. Picking up trash is not simple. It can be sometimes complicated, especially when you add recycling and then add composting. So I'd love to hear potentially in the future, I don't know if it would be in one of these sessions, our updates, but really digging into what that future looks like, and helping us understand, both from a budgetary perspective, also from a staffing perspective, and especially from an education perspective for residents of the city, how we're thinking about these issues and what our short-term plan looks like over the next year, and especially by 2030, 2031, we don't really have an option at that point, but we could be forced to make those decisions sooner should we have a failure. So just want to put that on the table for consideration, and of course, continue to extend my partnership in finding solutions there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you. And I got to leave for a meeting with another agency shortly, but I wanted to get a couple more questions in. As far as the drop-off centers are concerned, have you, based on the total number that was given, and I'll obviously wait for the breakdown by location, but it just seems to me that based on that many locations over that period of time, it seems like a relatively low amount of recycling being brought to those locations, which just begs the question if those are the best locations. Are you reviewing that, and are you open to moving locations or adding additional locations?
Yes, we are open to moving the locations if the community believes that it's better suited somewhere else. Yes, we're open to that.
Okay, because I noticed when it was released, of course not intentionally, there was no locations in my district, which is one of the highest recycling parts of the city. And so if you are willing to do additional locations, I do have some strategic locations that I think would be very successful, and I'm happy to talk to you offline about that. My next question would be for finance. How much money does it cost every time to do a full citywide recycling pickup? So either by week, by month, for those collections?
I would have to research the exact numbers. That's a complex question at this time.
So, so I've asked that same question now for 6 months, on more than a dozen times. So, at what point can I just get a simple answer as to, like, here's how much it costs to do a full citywide recycling pickup, whether it be by week, by month, by route, whatever it is, there's some metric. You guys have come to the council, you've gotten approved for essentially the same budget as last year without performing a critical, most basic city function. So we need to know how much that cost. And so I'm starting this request now, I guess, for next year's budget. I need an answer to that question because it can't cost the same amount to perform a function and not perform a function. So when do you think I can get an answer to that question?
I would have to do some more research to see what needs to go into producing that information, but if you are definitely requesting it by next budget cycle, we can definitely have it.
Well,
by
no,
then.
I don't want to give you another 9 months to do it. I mean, I've given 6 months, so I would hope that I can get it maybe in a month from now at the latest, you know, so that it only took 7 months to answer that question.
Thank you for the question. I'll talk with staff about that, and then I'll follow up with you directly about when a timeline for getting that response.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My last question is, so how can we be assured that when recycling does restart, that it's going to be done equitably, considering when street sweeping was restarted, it was done far from equitable, nor was it done legally. And so I just want to know how we can make sure that recycling, when it restarts, is done legally and equitably. The law states that that Department of Public Works director is required to provide curbside collection for both trash and recycling weekly. It also states in that same code that street sweeping is to be performed, the cleaning of the streets is also to be performed weekly. We know that laws are required to be applied evenly across the entire city. We learned in a previous hearing that for 6 months prior to street sweeping recently being resumed, that street sweeping was being performed only in the central district of the city. So obviously that is clearly based on legal experts who I spoke to is illegal. You can't unevenly provide services that are required by law to some neighborhoods and not others. So when recycling resumes, how can we be assured that you guys are not going to restart recycling only in certain neighborhoods and exclude other neighborhoods in the city?
So once we restart weekly recycling, it'll go back to when prior to the pandemic. You know, each resident will get picked up as usual. Right now, each resident is being picked up even with bi-weekly. So we have, you know, we're going to be equitable because every resident is going to get picked up.
Okay, so there's not going to be a phase in restart. It will be
No.
across the board. Everybody in the city will have the same amount of recycling pickups.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Schleifer. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to go back to my colleague's question. So I've noticed, I believe, I'm going off of my recollection from the capital improvement process. You guys submitted requests. One was to do compost facilities. My question, and there were 17, I think $17 million total requested and awarded.
Yeah.
For facilities updates for morale at various places, I recognize the priority of those. However, in the current capital queue, I see nothing for this diversion program. And I don't see as much planning in terms of what are we doing on a daily basis. Case in point, I think about the program that we had because, again, we're still coming out of the pandemic, still semi in the pandemic, and we had a high rate of persons who were being evicted. I wonder, is there any availability to bring back the program where we house that furniture and those items in a separate location so people can pick them up? That way, we are diverting actual things from coming into our waste collection. That's one part of my request, to see if we can revisit that. The other piece is, what is the strategic investment that we're willing to make for compost facilities. Case in point, PG County. As I remember their process, it was an 8-year process in terms of funding to affordability, in terms of like where it started generating revenue. So I just want to make sure that, do we have a plan that's similar to PG County's model, where they actively sought to build their facility with public funds and then got it to a point where it was profitable enough to actually generate revenue? So I just want to know where we are in terms of modeling from submission to the CIP process to education of persons to get involved in actual waste collection of this potential third stream, to the point where that this third stream then becomes revenue generating as it does for PG County. So I just want to make sure that was a request that came to you guys.
So I know last year we did put a lot of the waste diversion requests in for CIP, and we will do it again for the next budget season until we receive the funding for it. So we have submitted those requests.
And, excuse me, that's Marsha Collins again. Councilman, also our grants office is looking at all of the infrastructure opportunities that are coming down the pike, and they are very aware of our needs, so we will be looking at that as a potential source to get investments in the very things you're talking about.
So what I'm trying to request is a streamline of thought that I've seen from other public agencies, from my experience at the federal level, the state level, and now here, right? And I just want to have all the dots connected. Why am I submitting this CIP request? What is the potential revenue sources that we'll have to maintain this facility as well? So what I want to know is, what is your 1 year, 2 year, your 5 year, your 10-year plan? Because 2031 is not too far away, right? We're in 2022, and we only have less than 4 months left before 2023. So I just want to know exactly what is your short-term and your long-term goals as an agency, and also what opportunities you have identified in terms of funding sources, as well as potential revenue that can generate from the actual investments that we make. Because what I'm trying to do is help you make the case to not only the administration, but to the public, that if we invest in this and we're able to generate $15 million a year by 2032, that's an investment that's worthwhile if we spent $6 million today. So I just want to make sure we get in that idea of like, hey, if we can get $6 million tomorrow to build a facility, and we can get in the habit of getting residents educated on it, to get it up and running, facilitating this process, getting the latest technology, paying for it now before it gets far more expensive in terms of CIP, which is a different conversation that we're having with planning. So I just want to make sure that you can make the case to planning that if you give me $20 million today, I can generate $40 million later down the road, so that we get that idea, that return on investment. I just want to make sure that you guys are making that argument, because it feels disjointed between the requests to where we are today in this hearing.
I appreciate those comments, council member. So yes, so we received that. As we prepare on our end and get with you and planning to go over that briefing, we'll be fully prepared to answer those questions for you. Thank you.
So that's going to end our questions on the committee side. We are going to move to public testimony. We do have a member of the public who has signed up, and members of the public, you will have 3 minutes each to provide your testimony. If you feel that your testimony is longer than 3 minutes, you also have the option of submitting additional testimony via written channels. As a reminder, if you are in the council chamber and would like to testify, please sign in and check the appropriate box on the sign-in sheet at the back of the room. If you have joined us via WebEx and you would like to testify on this resolution, please use the raise hand function to let us know. I am going to call, I believe this is Shael Seltzer at this time. And I would just need you to state your full name before you begin your testimony. Thank you.
For the record is Milton Cox or Rolando Brown, here. Milton Cox, Rolando Brown from EMUD. Sorry, I used to live in a different state. The water bill, the water people. Anybody from water, part of public
No,
works
ma'am.
here?
That's solid waste.
Sorry?
Solid waste.
This hearing's focused on solid waste.
Oh, it just said public works.
It's okay, Ms. Salsa, when you're ready, you would just need to state your full name,
I
and
can't
you would
talk
begin your
to the water.
testimony. Well, we do have representatives from DPW. This is an oversight hearing, but I do welcome your testimony regardless.
Okay. I could do this a few different ways. Is this, I'm sorry, does this have to do with infrastructure?
It's anything DPW related that you want to share
Okay.
testimony on.
Well, then, can I respond to some of the things?
Thank you, Matt.
The water issue is my personal issue.
Ma'am, can you provide
Okay,
your
I'm
first
sorry.
and last name first?
Okay. My name is Shael Seltzer. I live in the neighborhood of Liberty Square. I'm in District 7, Councilman Torrance's district. And I have presents. I have a whole bunch of mail. My water bill has been screwed up from the very beginning. I was a brand new homeowner, and I moved in June 2020. And instead of DPW giving me a brand new number, they continued an account that was already open for the foreclosure company, U.S. Bank. I've been attempting to get this resolved for 2 years. And I'm tired of all the mail of other people who either used to live there or somehow use my address. And all of the, which can be considered harassment of all the texts and emails and calls of wanting to inquire to have houses sold. Tracy Terry, Simple Investment Solutions, LLC, Golden Arrow Real Estate. This is from the city. I've been continuously writing return to sender, putting in the mailbox in front of Montgomery Mall, and this continues. This is just some of it. I also get certified mail. I get court papers, all kinds of junk. This isn't even everything of all the other, the bank offers, the bank. I don't know, I don't open them because you're not supposed to, but this has got to stop. My bill is considerable now, and I know from previous experience that you overpay for utility, they won't give you the money back. They'll just say, well, you paid U.S. Bank, it was your decision, and why should I be paying a bill for $1 billion plus, who knows how much they are? But I bought a foreclosure, and I'm not responsible for their part of the bill. And also, I pre-registered, I registered too early, and then I was told continuously when I applied in March for the Water for All, and then they said you have to wait. And then I tried again and again and again, and it wouldn't let me re-register. And Councilman Torrance's staff helped me with that. But then I was told, we're not going to help you with anything else. And I had to come here for this. Now, in regards to
And Ms. Seltzer, I am
what was already shared
we're
here,
grateful for your testimony.
in regards to the
We
incinerator,
have exceeded the 3 minutes. If you would be able to wrap up at this time.
please, can I just address what
Sure.
the questions were, and I'll, the only way that people are not going to be affected by the incinerator is to end it. We have the second highest level of asthma in the country. We have an F rating for global, for ground ozone from the American Lung Association. I guess it's been about 2 months that I sent an email with my website. I've given, from the peace resolution, these are like next parts of, it was passed in 2001, of which it says that you cannot, especially knowing how harmful things, you cannot put this out to citizens. And you must use land efficiently. And I don't know, but B. Gaddy was one of the presenters, and it was unanimously, everyone wanted it.
And Ms. Seltzer, thanks so much for your testimony.
And so I encourage you to please go to goserenade.org/Baltimore and actually read all of the references that I have, because they're reliable references. I don't put trash. I look at everything that's on there, all the videos, all the things. And
Ms. Seltzer, thanks so much for your
this is part of
testimony.
reparations.
What we're going to make sure that we do,
Can't
we
just-
do have DPW
you can't just try to get
representatives.
the federal government to give reparations. Baltimore needs to do reparations too.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seltzer.
Who's going to help me with this? Who do I give this to?
We-
Because
we-
I'm here to give it back to the city. City bills, city junk.
Ms. Seltzer, my office will work with you in working with the.
How about you?
we
How about we meet? How about you answer my emails?
We do answer your emails.
How
Ms.
about you not come with a team of people about a bump on the road and not fix the road itself?
We fixed your road. Your road was repaved. You received new curbs and sidewalks, Ms. Seltzer. Our office will continue to provide as much services as possible to you. We will work with the postmaster in terms of addressing the mail. We're working as well on your water bill behalf as well. We're going to continue to do that, Ms. Seltzer. You can talk to me after the hearing, but we will continue to work on your behalf with the Postmaster General as well as the water issues.
Thank you, Ms. Seltzer, for your testimony. And thank you, Councilman Torrance. I'm sure that your office will follow up with Ms. Seltzer directly. Thank you. We're going to check to see if we have any testimony from the WebEx. And that was a no from our committee staff. So I do want to thank everyone for joining us within the chambers today, and also online, and the folks who will be viewing in the future. At this time, the next quarterly legislative oversight hearing on the Department of Public Works is scheduled for November the 9th, 2022, and this hearing is now in recess.